Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Receives Cybernetic Arms? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. All Izuku Midoriya ever wanted was to be a hero, but he had always been told it was impossible without a quirk. Little did he know, everything was about to change. At 15, soon to be 16, Midoriya was quirkless in a world filled with extraordinary abilities. As he snapped out of his daze, he realized he was in class, and fortunately, it was the last day of school. He looked up to see his teacher speaking, wishing everyone a good summer and asking if any of them were considering entering the hero course. Bakugo was the first to raise his hand, and among many others, Midoriya hesitantly lifted his own hand, feeling Bakugo's glare piercing the back of his head. The teacher expressed his wishes for their endeavors, and as the bell rang, the students began to leave. Midoriya took his time watching them exit, slowly making his way to his locker. Once he arrived, he found himself alone. As he collected his belongings, his head was suddenly slammed into the locker door. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Bakugo gripped Midoriya's hair, warning him to give up on his worthless dream of being a hero. Midoriya struggled in his grip, trying to explain that schools like UA had stopped the rule requiring a quirk for admission. Bakugo slammed his hand against the locker, causing a small explosion that startled Midoriya. With a scoff, Bakugo declared that someone like Midoriya could never be a hero, quirk or not, before releasing him and walking away. Leaning against the locker, Midoriya slid to the ground, fighting back tears. He reminded himself that heroes don't cry and resolved to pull himself together. Standing up, he collected his things and walked out the door. As he walked down the road, he noticed something emerging from a drain. Crouching down for a closer look, he was suddenly attacked by a green sludge that clung to his face and began to crawl into his mouth and nose. Just then, a tall figure leaped down with a loud proclamation. "It's okay because I am here," the figure announced, pulling back his fist and swinging it with a shout of Texas Smash. The attack created a gust of wind that blew the sludge away. Midoriya looked up to see All Might, the #1 hero, quickly capturing the sludge in an empty bottle. Regaining his composure, Midoriya exclaimed his admiration for All Might and scrambled to retrieve his notebook, only to find it already signed. All Might chuckled at Midoriya's excitement, but suddenly, his phone rang. After answering, All Might informed Midoriya that he had to leave. However, Midoriya, desperate for guidance, grabbed All Might's arm and asked if it was still possible to be a hero without a quirk. All Might's expression turned serious as he explained that without a quirk, it was unlikely for anyone to become a hero, even with the new rules at schools like UA. With that, All Might leaped into the air. Midoriya fell to his knees, overwhelmed by a wave of hopelessness. All his life, he had believed he could become a hero, but now he felt crushed by the weight of reality. Determined not to give up, he resolved to prove All Might wrong. With renewed determination, he decided to chase after the hero. After dropping off the sludge villain, All Might landed on the roof of an empty building. As he entered, he suddenly felt a strong punch to his face, which barely fazed him. Turning, he saw a man with red hair and flames flickering from his hands. All Might maintained his composure, addressing the villain and suggesting they could avoid a fight. However, the villain shot another blast of fire, forcing All Might to stumble back. The villain, refusing to go back to prison, accidentally backed into a gas pipe, causing gas to hiss out. All Might's eyes widened in realization, warning the villain to stop. Ignoring him, the villain ignited his hand, mixing fire with gas and creating a powerful explosion. All Might attempted to grab him but was thrown out through a window. Regaining his footing, All Might rushed back to the ground floor, only to find a body at the entrance. As he approached, he realized it was Izuku Midoriya, with flames burning his right arm and left leg. All Might clapped his hands together, creating a gust of wind that extinguished the flames. Kneeling beside Midoriya, he heard the boy's faint words expressing his desire to be a hero. All Might gritted his teeth, pulling out his phone to call for an ambulance, vowing that he wouldn't let Midoriya die. Those were the last words Midoriya heard before losing consciousness. Midoriya drifts in and out of consciousness, hearing voices around him. His mother sounds shaken as she pleads for someone to save him. A man responds, expressing uncertainty about his survival, mentioning that his arm and leg are severely damaged and will need to be amputated. Confusion washes over Midoriya as he realizes they are discussing him. His mother's voice rises in desperation, and the man apologizes, stating that they will schedule the operation for the next day. All Might interjects, expressing regret that he couldn't save Midoriya. His mother's voice carries a mix of anger and sorrow as she struggles with her emotions, wishing to blame All Might but ultimately recognizing that it won't help her son. All Might reassures her that he will find a way to help Midoriya, promising that he will be okay and that he knows someone who might be able to assist. His mother hesitates but ultimately agrees, hoping for a solution. Midoriya groans as a bright light pierces his eyes, forcing him to open them. He sees a ceiling fan and struggles to sit up. Memories flood back, and he turns to grab a mirror from the bedside table. As he examines his reflection, he is shocked to find his arm is now metal. Panic sets in as he realizes his entire arm is gone. He screams in horror and falls off the bed, only to discover that his leg is also metal. He scrambles backward, pressing against the wall in disbelief. A girl enters the room, expressing concern for his well-being and urging him to calm down. Midoriya, overwhelmed, demands to know what happened to his limbs. The girl explains that an explosion caused severe injuries, leading to the amputation of his arm and leg. However, All Might had contacted her father, who replaced his lost limbs with cybernetic ones. She warns him to be careful as the technology is still experimental. Midoriya struggles to accept this new reality and pushes the girl away as she tries to help him. He accidentally sends her flying back, immediately apologizing and expressing his inability to control his new strength. Tears well in his eyes as she reassures him that she is fine. He insists she should leave, fearing he is dangerous. She reluctantly agrees to get a doctor and exits the room. Alone, Midoriya grapples with his new reality, questioning why this happened to him. He attempts to stand and reach for a glass of water, but his cybernetic arm shatters it in his grip. Frustrated, he sinks back to the floor, realizing he needs to find his mother. He searches for his phone but finds nothing. Determined, he heads for the door, trying to be gentle with the handle, but it breaks off as he applies too much force, swinging the door open. Stumbling into the hallway, he is met with a large glass window and is shocked to realize he is no longer in Japan. He calls out for his mother, growing increasingly frantic as doctors and security approach him. In a moment of panic, he swings his arm, sending a guard flying. He demands to know where his mother is, pushing more guards away until he feels a prick on his neck. Turning around, he sees a doctor with an empty syringe before everything goes black. When Midoriya awakens, he hears murmurs from a man and a girl. He groans and tries to sit up, only to find himself restrained. The girl reassures him that the others are okay, and he breathes a sigh of relief. She introduces herself as Melissa Shield and explains that her father, David Shield, is the one who helped him. Midoriya asks what happened, and David hands him a phone, suggesting Melissa should explain. As he puts the phone to his ear, he hears his mother's voice, and a smile spreads across his face. They exchange words, and she explains everything that has transpired. After their conversation, he hangs up, feeling a mix of emotions. He turns to Melissa and David, piecing together the events that led to his current situation. David confirms that All Might called him to help after the accident, and he reassures Midoriya that while this adjustment will be challenging with effort, he can adapt and regain a sense of normalcy. Midoriya shook his head, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. David acknowledged his feelings, explaining that despite how it seemed, he had a unique opportunity. The technology he was dealing with was one of a kind, and even if he didn't feel lucky, he was. David then proceeded to examine Midoriya's arm and leg to ensure everything was properly calibrated. After what felt like hours, he finally completed the calibrations. Midoriya was then sent for physiotherapy, where he met Melissa. She guided him through various exercises focused on improving his control. Midoriya looked up at her, feeling guilty for their earlier encounter. He expressed his apologies for accidentally pushing her. Melissa smiled reassuringly, letting him know that she understood it was an accident. That was the purpose of their sessions. The sooner he learned to control his abilities, the less likely such accidents would occur. Midoriya nodded, acknowledging her words. He realized she was right and thanked her for her support as he continued with the exercises. 4 months later, Midoriya sat on his bed, dressed in shorts and a green hoodie, curling a dumbbell in his non-cybernetic arm. After placing it on the ground, he stretched both arms, pulling up his sleeves. He smiled as he compared the two arms, noting how they were now more or less the same size. He murmured to himself about how his cybernetic arm used to be larger. Just then the door opened, and Melissa walked in, holding a case. She greeted him with excitement, saying she had something for him that was finally done. Midoriya's smile widened as he took the case from her. She explained that her father had just finished the final touches, ensuring that the new enhancements matched his skin tone perfectly and would be more durable than the previous ones, which he had broken easily. Midoriya examined what looked like a glove that mirrored his skin. He pulled it over his cybernetic arm, covering the machinery completely and making his arm appear normal. He took another piece for his leg, stood up, and looked in the mirror. Melissa clapped her hands in joy, praising how great it looked. Midoriya expressed his gratitude, acknowledging how much she and her father had helped him, feeling he could never repay them. Melissa reassured him that their work contributed to research that could benefit many people, and she was glad to help him. Midoriya turned to her, recalling that she had mentioned All Might would visit, but he still hadn't heard from him. He expressed his desire to go home, feeling confident in his grasp of his cybernetics and wondering why he couldn't at least go outside for a walk. Melissa sighed, explaining that her father believed it was better for him to stay a bit longer. Midoriya groaned in frustration but asked if she could call All Might again, feeling the need to talk to him. She agreed but hesitated, unsure of how to convince her father and All Might about his potential. Midoriya thanked her and decided to take a walk. He made his way down the corridors of the lab and found the staircase, heading to the roof. Upon opening the door, he felt the refreshing breeze and walked toward the metal fence, gazing out at the view. Suddenly, he noticed smoke rising from the street below. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through the news and stopped at a recent report about a villain named Red Mask, who had just robbed a bank and was causing chaos downtown, with no heroes in sight. Feeling a surge of determination, Midoriya realized he could help. He pulled up the hood of his hoodie, tensed his legs, and leaped into the air, soaring upward with a smile. He landed on a nearby building, using his cybernetic leg to absorb the impact before sprinting across the rooftops, jumping from one building to another. Eventually, he caught up to Red Mask, who was on a motorbike with bags of money strapped to the back. Midoriya took a deep breath, using his cybernetic arm to rip a brick from the roof and throwing it at the bike's wheel, causing the villain to crash. Red Mask hit the ground hard but quickly rolled over, revealing a gun attached to his arm. He aimed it at the crowd behind him and fired. Midoriya's heart raced as he instinctively pushed off his right leg, speeding toward the crowd to block the bullets with his arm. The bullets fell harmlessly to the ground, and he felt a rush of adrenaline. Just as he turned back, Red Mask's gun transformed into a rocket launcher, firing missiles as he attempted to escape. Midoriya's eyes widened, and he spotted a lamppost nearby. He quickly ripped it from the ground, swinging it to collide with the missiles, creating a powerful explosion that sent him crashing against a wall. Groaning, Midoriya got up and saw Red Mask trying to start his motorcycle. However, the bike wouldn't move because Midoriya was gripping it tightly. Seizing the opportunity, he swung his other arm, striking Red Mask and knocking him to the ground. Finally, Midoriya sighed in relief, his heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement, realizing that he had helped people. As a crowd began to gather, thanking him, Midoriya pulled his hood lower to cover his face, noticing reporters arriving at the scene. He quickly leaped into the air, landing on a nearby building and making his way back to the lab. Upon landing on the hospital roof, he noticed his clothes were torn, and he had some cuts on his legs and face. Before returning to his room, he sneaked into the med bay to clean up his injuries. Once back in his room, he saw the news report praising him as a hero. The realization struck him he could truly be a hero. In the following days, Midoriya felt anxious, wondering if Mr. Shield had discovered his little outing. However, it seemed he was in the clear. As he looked out the window, he thought to himself that perhaps he had gotten lucky and should quit while he was ahead. But the thought of helping people lingered in his mind, and he considered that as long as he didn't go out too often, it should be fine. Midoriya was having dinner with the Shields, a routine that had become quite normal for him. After finishing his meal, he took his plate to the sink and prepared to leave when Melissa called out to him, asking if he wanted to help with one of her inventions. He scratched his head and politely declined, explaining that he was busy. Melissa raised an eyebrow, curious about what he was up to, but he was already on his way out. David, observing their interaction, continued reading the newspaper until an article caught his eye. The headline featured a new hero in the city, and as he looked at the accompanying picture of the hero wearing a familiar hoodie, he muttered to himself, wondering if it could be Midoriya. Later, Midoriya sneaked back into the lab, making his way down the corridor until he opened his bedroom door to find David's shield waiting for him. David wasted no time, informing Midoriya that he knew he had been sneaking out to play hero. He expressed concern over Midoriya's recklessness, emphasizing that he could have gotten caught. Midoriya clenched his fists, frustrated. He explained that being confined to the lab while possessing cybernetics that allowed him to do amazing things was unbearable. He had always dreamed of being a hero, and now that he had the chance, he refused to stop. David sighed, anticipating Midoriya's response. He revealed that he had brought someone with him. Midoriya turned to see All Might entering the room, his surprise quickly turning to anger. He expressed his disappointment that All Might had only come after David called him, feeling neglected after months of trying to reach out. All Might placed a reassuring hand on Midoriya's shoulder, apologizing for his absence and explaining that he had been busy but recognized the importance of the situation. Midoriya, still frustrated, asked if All Might was there to stop him too. All Might shook his head, maintaining a smile as he offered Midoriya an opportunity. He acknowledged Midoriya's desire to be a hero and mentioned that he had seen some of his actions. After discussing with David, they had come to an agreement. All Might revealed that he had been working at UA Hero School and wanted Midoriya to join him in Japan, where he could help him learn to control his abilities. However, he cautioned that Midoriya could not disclose his cybernetics to anyone. Midoriya's face lit up with excitement at the prospect of attending UA. He eagerly accepted the offer, and All Might encouraged him to start packing. Before he could move, David interjected, mentioning that Melissa would also be going to assist with any potential issues regarding his cybernetics. Midoriya was thrilled at the news, expressing his eagerness to return to Japan, see his mother, and fulfill his dream of becoming a hero. David smiled, expressing his initial reluctance to help but now feeling glad about Midoriya's future. He added a warning about the importance of the cybernetics, emphasizing that they were his life's work. Midoriya and Melissa boarded the plane, while David spoke with All Might, expressing concern about the decision. All Might reassured him that Midoriya would be safer in Japan, where he could protect him and the cybernetics. After landing in Mizudafu, Midoriya said goodbye to Melissa and All Might, promising to meet them the next day. He hurried home, knocking on the door, where his mother opened it, standing in shock. Midoriya smiled nervously, apologizing for not being able to inform her of his return. Before he could finish, she pulled him into a warm embrace, tears soaking his shirt. She expressed her relief that he was back in one piece, and he felt tears welling up in his eyes, realizing it had been months since he had seen her. Inko pulled him inside and suggested they not discuss it right away since she had just finished cooking. They would eat first, and he could explain everything later. The next day, after finishing breakfast, Inko looked at his arm, remarking how it resembled how it used to be. Midoriya smiled, noting that it felt different. He stood up, remembering he needed to meet All Might and Melissa, who would show him around UA before his first day. As he grabbed his blue hoodie and headed for the door, Inko stopped him, expressing her concern about his safety and the condition of his limbs. Midoriya reassured her, explaining that being a hero was his lifelong dream. He believed he had a real opportunity to help people, even without a quirk. After a moment of hesitation, Inko sighed and urged him to be careful. He promised he would, and they exchanged goodbyes. As soon as he stepped outside, Midoriya ducked into an alley, pulling up his hood. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind rush past him as he leaped onto a building. He declared his excitement for UA as he sprinted across rooftops, making his way to the school. Upon arriving at UA High School, Midoriya ran up to the gates, where All Might greeted him. All Might noted that he was glad to see him and explained that Melissa had gone to explore the support class with Power Loader. With that settled, they began touring the school, with All Might showing Midoriya the training areas, classrooms, and event center. As they walked past the classrooms, All Might gestured toward one in particular. He explained that it belonged to Class 1A, the class Midoriya would be joining. Curious, Midoriya peered inside and wondered where the students were. UA High School. Midoriya hurriedly approached the gates where All Might was waiting for him. All Might greeted him with enthusiasm, expressing his excitement about showing him the hero course. Midoriya looked around, curious about Melissa's whereabouts, and All Might explained that she was exploring the support class with Power Loader. With that, they set off to tour the school, visiting training areas, classrooms, and the event center. As they walked past a classroom, All Might pointed it out as belonging to Class 1A, the class Midoriya would be joining. Midoriya peered inside, noticing the absence of students, and asked where they were. All Might informed him that they were likely engaged in practical training and offered to show him. Midoriya's face lit up with excitement at the prospect. They made their way to Ground Zone Beta, but instead of entering, they climbed up to the viewing area. From there, they could observe the training session through multiple screens. Midoriya noticed a group of students gathered around, and All Might explained the scenario. Two teams were competing, one defending a bomb, while the other attempted to capture it. Midoriya's attention was drawn to Bakugo, who was in his class. He watched intently as two girls, one with brown hair and another with green hair displaying frog-like traits, were part of the hero team. As the training progressed, Midoriya took notes on their quirks. He observed the brown-haired girl getting caught by Bakugo, leading to a fierce confrontation. Initially, the fight seemed balanced, but Bakugo gradually gained the upper hand. He unleashed a powerful explosion that sent the girl crashing against a wall. Midoriya, concerned, turned to All Might, questioning why the fight continued despite Bakugo's clear advantage. All Might explained that the girl, Uraraka, had not given up yet, so the instructor, Aizawa, had not called off the match. Midoriya felt uneasy as he watched Uraraka struggle to stay on her feet, finally declaring her surrender in a weak voice. Bakugo, undeterred, prepared for another attack. Just then, Midoriya heard something that no one else seemed to notice. All Might acknowledged that things might be escalating. Suddenly, Midoriya dashed away, catching All Might off guard. Uraraka hit the ground hard, exhausted and injured. She attempted to rise but was too fatigued to continue. Bakugo taunted her, ready to unleash another explosion. However, Aizawa's voice cut through the tension, instructing Bakugo to stop, declaring that the exercise had gone too far. Bakugo smirked, dismissing the concern, but as he prepared to attack, Midoriya burst through the floor, causing Bakugo to stumble and accidentally fire his explosion towards the ceiling. Midoriya landed on the remaining floor and rushed to Uraraka, gently lifting her as she slowly opened her eyes. He asked if she was okay, but she could only mumble before losing consciousness. Bakugo, noticing Midoriya, shouted in disbelief, demanding to know what he was doing there. Midoriya smiled, revealing that he was now a student at UA. Bakugo scoffed, insisting that someone like Midoriya could never be a hero and accused him of interrupting his training. Midoriya's smile faded as he pointed out that Uraraka had given up and that Bakugo should have recognized when to stop. Bakugo, amused by Midoriya's newfound confidence, challenged him to a fight to prove what a real hero could do. Midoriya carefully placed Uraraka down, acknowledging that people change, but Bakugo would always be the same. He prepared for the fight, but just as they were about to clash, Aizawa's voice echoed through the speakers, declaring the exercise over and announcing the hero team's victory. Bakugo's frustration boiled over as he protested the outcome. Aizawa explained that Bakugo's explosion had inadvertently allowed the opposing team to win. He also informed Bakugo that Headmaster Nizu wished to speak with him regarding his behavior. Aizawa then instructed Midoriya to bring Uraraka to Recovery Girl. Midoriya rushed down the corridor, carrying Uraraka alongside Azui, one of her teammates. He turned to her, asking for directions, and she pointed down the hall. Upon reaching the medbay, Recovery Girl instructed him to set Uraraka down on the bed. Midoriya complied and stepped back, anxious about his classmate's condition. He asked Recovery Girl if Uraraka would be okay, and she assured him that she would recover with rest after her quirk was applied. As they exited the room, Azui introduced herself, expressing gratitude for Midoriya's help. Midoriya brushed off her thanks, relieved that Uraraka was safe. He glanced at the clock, realizing he needed to find All Might and bid farewell to Azui, promising to see her the next day. As he headed back, he encountered All Might, who regrettably informed him that their tour would have to be cut short due to other commitments. But Midoriya would surely have more fun exploring the place once he started. All Might left him in the corridor and, once Midoriya was out of sight, picked up the phone to respond to David. He confirmed he was on his way to check out the warehouse, expressing his skepticism about the missing tech parts being anything more than a coincidence, but acknowledged it was a lead worth investigating. After ending the call, Midoriya walked down the corridor in the opposite direction of All Might, contemplating heading home. He then remembered that Melissa might still be around and made his way to the robotics lab. In an unknown location, a green-haired man named Nobu entered a room holding a small needle. He approached a large man in a white coat and informed him that it was time. The large man sighed as he lifted his arm and injected the needle into his skin, circuit-like veins momentarily appearing before vanishing. Nobu took the needle back and asked how the man felt. The man stood up, feeling much better, and inquired about the remaining doses. Nobu estimated they had enough for 5 more. The man then asked about the location of a boy they were tracking. Nobu placed the needle down and reported that the others had followed the boy to Japan, specifically Masudafu, where he was attending UA High School. The man stretched his neck and instructed Nobu to tell Sokiru to follow the boy. He considered the situation at a hero school problematic, but insisted they find a time when the boy was alone to take him. Outside of UA, Midoriya walked with Melissa, recounting the events of his day. He described it as hectic and asked about her day. A smile broke on her face as she shared that it had been a good day, despite the lab not being as large as her father's. She enjoyed being around people her age who shared her interests, although some, like Mei Hatsum, were quite energetic. Melissa recalled how Mei had wanted her to test her rocket boots, which had been leaking rocket fuel. Midoriya laughed, hoping he wouldn't run into Mei. Melissa defended her, saying that Mei was actually very smart and had created some amazing inventions. She expressed her excitement about attending UA and seeing where Uncle Might worked and trained future heroes. Midoriya's smile widened at her enthusiasm, and he couldn't help but laugh. When Melissa turned to him with a frown and elbowed his side, he explained that her excitement reminded him of his own reaction when he first heard about UA. Confused, she asked if that was a good thing, but Midoriya changed the subject, saying he was heading in a different direction. As he walked away, he heard her call out goodbye, but he playfully pretended not to hear her. The next day, Midoriya struggled with his school uniform, particularly his tie, which ended up unusually short. Realizing he was late, he bid farewell to his mother and rushed out the door. Scanning the empty street, he panicked about being late and pushed off with his cybernetic leg, speeding down the road. To avoid the heavily populated street ahead, he attempted to jump onto the roof of an empty construction building but miscalculated his jump, crashing into a wall. He swung his arm back, smashing his cybernetic fist through the half-finished wall and landing on the hard ground in a cloud of dust. Groaning, he pulled out his phone and noted the time, realizing he had only 5 minutes until class started and was now lying in a pile of broken cement bricks. At UA High School, Kirishima leaned forward in his chair to comment on Midoriya's tardiness, noting that he was pretty late. Bakugo groaned, suggesting that perhaps Midoriya had finally realized that a quirkless loser like him wasn't cut out to be a hero. Ida, overhearing the conversation, couldn't help but interject, reminding them that Midoriya had a quirk. Just then, Midoriya rushed through the door, drawing everyone's attention. Uraraka locked eyes with him, wondering if he was the same person from yesterday. Midoriya apologized for being late, explaining that he had run into some trouble. Mr. Aizawa sighed, lacking the energy to question him further, and instructed him to take his seat. Before Aizawa could return to the lesson, Bakugo muttered something under his breath. Aizawa prompted him to speak up, and Bakugo demanded to know how Midoriya had gotten into the school through recommendation, questioning his sudden change from being quirkless to attending without taking a test. Midoriya sighed, unsure of what Bakugo wanted him to say. Bakugo then expressed his desire to see Midoriya's quirk in action, drawing the attention of the rest of the class. Aizawa finally intervened, reminding Bakugo that he was already in trouble with the principal. Midoriya, however, offered to demonstrate his quirk if it was all right with Aizawa. Aizawa groaned but agreed, noting that he hadn't tested Midoriya's quirk yet, as they had done with everyone else's during the first week. He announced that they were going to ground 0 Beta. Class 1A gathered around the observation deck of Ground Zone Beta as Midoriya entered the battlefield, now dressed in his UA sports uniform. Mina groaned, expressing her doubts about the necessity of the test, while Bakugo shouted emphatically that it was indeed necessary. Aizawa sighed at the noise, reminding Bakugo to keep it down, as he needed to assess Midoriya's abilities for his improvement. As Midoriya stretched, a beep signaled the start of the test. Aizawa's voice came through the comms, announcing that he would be sending out the robots used in the practical exam to see what Midoriya could do without interruption. The voice cut off as the robots entered, and Midoriya smirked, clenching his fists. He launched himself off his cybernetic leg but overestimated his power, landing awkwardly and groaning upon impact. Ida looked back at Aizawa, questioning the wisdom of this exercise, but Aizawa remained silent, observing. Midoriya quickly regained his footing as a robot approached. He reassured himself that he could handle robots, swinging his leg up and smashing it into the robot's head, causing it to drop. He continued his assault, leaping forward and destroying the next robot with a powerful punch. He then targeted a taller opponent, grabbing its head and slamming it into the ground. Breathing heavily, he dodged an attack, seized the robot's arm, and hurled it into another enemy. Class 1A watched in awe, with Kirishima commenting on Midoriya's rocky start but noting his potential. Ojiro agreed, suggesting that Midoriya must possess a strength quirk, while Yaoyorozu observed that he seemed strong enough to destroy the robots effortlessly. Suddenly, a larger robot approached, looking more formidable. It swung its fist, which Midoriya caught with his right hand, struggling against its strength. The class watched with concern as Todoroki remarked on Midoriya's apparent struggle, and Tokoyami noted that this robot was a three-pointer, one of the strongest types. Thinking quickly, Midoriya pushed the fist aside and jumped onto the robot, gripping its head and tearing it off as sparks flew. The robot ceased movement and fell, throwing Midoriya to the ground. Regret washed over him as he felt the impact in his back, but he quickly noticed another robot preparing to attack. Just then, Aizawa's voice came through his earpiece, instructing him that it was enough and commending his performance. As the robots began to shut down, Midoriya sighed in relief. Aizawa advised him to work on his control and precision, emphasizing the importance of not overshooting or underestimating opponents. Midoriya nodded, absorbing the feedback. As the students of Class 1A began discussing Midoriya's performance, Kaminari noted his power but pointed out the need for refinement. Momo agreed, emphasizing the importance of control. Todoroki, ever analytical, acknowledged Midoriya's ability to adapt and overcome challenges. Aizawa addressed the class, reminding them that they were there to learn and improve, and instructed Midoriya to reflect on his strengths and weaknesses before heading back to the classroom for a debrief. As Class 1A exited the observation deck, Midoriya felt the adrenaline from the test still coursing through him. The experience had highlighted areas for improvement but also reinforced his growing understanding of his cybernetics. He needed more control, he thought, scratching his eye as it suddenly began to itch. When lunch arrived, Midoriya felt uncertain about where to go, noticing that everyone had formed their own groups. He considered seeking out Melissa but then realized he wasn't alone, Uraraka was still at her desk. Uraraka hesitated before approaching Midoriya, offering a small, appreciative smile. She thanked him for stepping in during the incident with Bakugo, expressing her gratitude for his bravery. Midoriya returned the smile, feeling warmth from her words, and explained that he couldn't stand by when someone was in trouble, as that was what heroes did. She chuckled and nodded, acknowledging his point. As their conversation continued, the atmosphere lightened. Uraraka invited him to join her for lunch, but Midoriya hesitated, feeling like he might intrude on her space. Just then, Ida entered the classroom, looking around with his usual serious expression. He declared that it was time for lunch and urged them to proceed to the cafeteria promptly. Uraraka laughed at his enthusiasm, assuring Midoriya that he wouldn't be intruding. With a light blush, he agreed, thinking he couldn't really say no. Once they reached the cafeteria, the trio found a table and settled down for lunch amidst the lively buzz of conversation. As they talked, the discussion shifted to their quirks and training experiences. Uraraka leaned in, her curiosity piqued, and asked Midoriya how his quirk worked. Midoriya hesitated, realizing he needed to be cautious about how much he revealed. He explained that it was a strength-based quirk that enhanced his physical abilities, though it didn't work everywhere. Uraraka nodded, accepting his response. Ida chimed in, eager to share about his own quirk, but Midoriya interjected, recalling that Ida had engines in his calves that provided a significant speed boost. He also mentioned Ida's older brother, Ingenium, whom he had heard was an admirable hero. Ida's eyes widened in surprise, and he nodded proudly, confirming the connection. Midoriya expressed his determination to follow in his mentor's footsteps and uphold the Ida family's legacy. He then turned his attention to Uraraka, curious about her quirk. Uraraka felt a bit embarrassed as she compared her ability to those of her classmates. She explained that her quirk, called zero gravity, allowed her to make objects float by touching them. Midoriya tilted his head, intrigued by the variety of quirks in their class. He found Uraraka's ability impressive and began to imagine the potential it held for hero work. He encouraged her, suggesting that with enough hard work, she might even be able to control gravity itself. Uraraka smiled, appreciating how he could see the value in something she had initially thought was insignificant. She considered his words, realizing that there was indeed a possibility for growth. As the day came to a close, Midoriya decided to walk home with Ida and Uraraka, while Melissa was busy with a project. Unbeknownst to them, a man with pinkish hair lurked in the shadows, observing Midoriya intently. He took a puff from his cigarette and tapped his communication device, expressing frustration about the difficulty of getting close to Midoriya with him always surrounded by friends. A voice responded, assuring him that they should wait for the right moment. The upcoming trip to USJ was mentioned as a prime opportunity, as it was expected that the League of Villains would create chaos during the event. The man nodded, extinguishing his cigarette, ready to follow the plan. As Midoriya and Melissa made their way to school, Midoriya was lost in thought until Melissa elbowed him, prompting a groan from him. She turned to him with a frown, noticing his troubled expression. Something was clearly bothering him. He chuckled lightly, admitting that since he joined late, he hadn't submitted a design for his hero costume and had no idea what it would look like. Suddenly, Melissa grabbed his arm, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She offered to help him, claiming that as the only one who knew about his enhancements, she could incorporate them into his suit. Midoriya couldn't help but smile. Her enthusiasm was contagious. He agreed, feeling relieved that he wouldn't have to come up with ideas on his own. As they arrived at the school gate, Melissa dashed off toward the workshop, brimming with ideas. Midoriya walked to class, where he was met by Kaminari, who swung his arm around Midoriya's shoulder. Kaminari commented on how cute the girl Midoriya had been talking to was, and Midoriya felt flustered for a moment. He explained that Melissa was a close friend of his, and Kaminari smirked, teasing him about his luck. Midoriya, still a bit confused, followed Kaminari into the classroom. Once seated, Mr. Aizawa began the day's briefing. He informed the class that today's training would be different, as he and two other pro heroes would oversee their activities. The focus would be on rescue operations, particularly in the context of natural disasters. He mentioned that while they could wear their costumes, They should remember that they weren't fully accustomed to them yet. Excitement rippled through the class, but Midoriya remained deep in thought, questioning why 3 pros were involved instead of just 1. He recalled hearing about a security breach the previous night and wondered if it was connected. The thought of villains attempting to infiltrate a hero school puzzled him. In an unknown location, Nobu rushed into a room to see Wolfram, who was focused on a screen. Nobu announced that someone was there to see him. Wolfram turned his attention to Shigaraki, expressing his surprise at seeing him again. He assumed Shigaraki had come for a reason, and as old friends, he suggested they discuss matters that could interfere with his plans. Wolfram sighed as he leaned back in his chair, calling Shigaraki's plan idiotic. He pointed out that attempting to kill All Might with the monster Shigaraki had created was foolish. Shigaraki's eyes widened in shock, but Wolfram cut him off, asserting that he knew Shigaraki would fail because his team was weak. Shigaraki's anger flared as he protested, but Wolfram silenced him with a commanding presence. He reminded Shigaraki that his actions were in service of All for One, who had been killed by All Might. Wolfram questioned Shigaraki's belief that this was the path to revenge, calling him blind. When Shigaraki groaned in frustration, Wolfram offered a deal. He would help Shigaraki kill All Might with a plan that wouldn't lead to his demise, in exchange for Shigaraki's assistance in capturing someone from the same school where All Might worked. Wolfram extended his hand for a handshake, promising that with his help, Shigaraki would achieve his revenge. Shigaraki, intrigued, reached for Wolfram's hand, but suddenly found himself frozen in place. Wolfram smiled, having anticipated this reaction. He allowed Shigaraki to move again, and as Shigaraki stepped back, Wolfram turned to a desk displaying a video feed of UA. He suggested they stick to a verbal agreement instead. Shigaraki smirked, warning Wolfram to be careful, and then exited the hideout. Nobu rushed to Wolfram's side, expressing concern about the unstable man. Wolfram remained focused on the screen, confident in his ability to handle Shigaraki. He ordered Nobu to adjust their plans and send them to Shigaraki, emphasizing the need for precision. Wolfram believed that the quickest way to dismantle society was by eliminating its number 1 hero. He declared that without hope and heroes to rely on, society would crumble. Nobu nodded, impressed by Wolfram's strategy. He remarked that he hadn't thought Wolfram cared about All for One. Wolfram clarified that All for One had given him his quirk, and he was determined to take revenge on All Might for killing him. As he gripped his chair tightly, bending the metal, Nobu took a cautious step back. Once Wolfram relaxed, he reminded Nobu to keep tabs on a hero killer rumored to be in the area, as he could prove useful. At UA High School, Class 1A boarded the bus. Uraraka approached Midoriya, wearing her new costume. She complimented him on how amazing his costume looked, which made her blush lightly. However, she quickly asked why he wasn't wearing his own costume. Midoriya looked down at his incomplete outfit, realizing he hadn't finished it yet. The bus rolled down the street, its engine humming softly as it carried passengers to their destinations. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of anticipation and weariness. People glanced at their phones, lost in their thoughts, while others stared out the window, watching the world blur by. As the bus approached a stop, a young woman with bright eyes stood up, her heart racing with excitement. She had been waiting for this moment, ready to embark on a new adventure. The doors opened with a hiss and she stepped off, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. The city was alive with energy, bustling with people and the sounds of life. She felt a sense of freedom wash over her, knowing that anything was possible. With determination in her stride, she set off down the sidewalk, ready to embrace whatever awaited her. As they made their way to the UA High School's training facility, known as USJ, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Each step brought them closer to the challenges that awaited them, and the excitement was palpable among the group. They could feel the weight of their training and the importance of the mission ahead. With determination in their hearts, they pressed on, ready to face whatever obstacles lay in their path. Once the students entered USJ, they were greeted by the pro hero 13. Midoriya's eyes widened in awe as he recognized her. He rubbed his eye and turned to Uraraka, who smiled back at him. She asked if he was okay, noticing his discomfort. He reassured her that he was fine, just dealing with an eye issue that had been bothering him for a few days. 13 began to explain their training focus, emphasizing the importance of using their abilities to save people, while Aizawa stood beside her. Before Aizawa could finish his thought, the lights in the arena flickered, and multiple purple portals opened, allowing several villains to emerge. Aizawa quickly reacted, shouting for 13 to get the students out. He rushed forward, activating his quirk to neutralize the villain's abilities. In the chaos, Aizawa momentarily diverted his gaze from a smoke villain, giving him the opportunity to vanish. As 13 led the students toward the exit, a massive cloud of purple smoke loomed over them, freezing everyone in place. Midoriya, drawing from his previous experiences, remained calm and noticed that the smoke villain was not alone. A wave of true fear washed over the students as 13 prepared to activate her quirk. Bakugo and Kirishima leaped forward to attack, but Midoriya suddenly shouted for them to stop. Kirishima caught a glimpse of something shiny, but before he could react, the force of an attack sent him crashing to the ground. Bakugo attempted to retaliate, but the purple smoke began to stretch around them, trying to ensnare them. Ida quickly grabbed Siro and Sato, helping them escape the danger. Midoriya instinctively reached for Uraraka and Ojiro, leaping into the air to avoid the smoke, but they were pulled back as it engulfed them. Midoriya groaned as he landed on a hard, wet surface. He stood up and called out to Uraraka, helping her to her feet. She nodded, still trying to understand the situation. They found themselves in a completely different terrain, surrounded by buildings reminiscent of their practice exam ground, but here it was raining. Midoriya searched for Ojiro, but Uraraka shook her head, indicating she hadn't seen him. Determined to find a way out, Midoriya urged Uraraka to follow him. He explained that while Aizawa could handle the villains, 13 was up against the smoke villain and a man with a sword real threats. Midoriya's mind raced with questions about why 13 was targeted and whether this was connected to the break-in at school. Suddenly, Uraraka's voice snapped him out of his thoughts as she pointed out a large bald man in black tactical gear, similar to the one wielding the sword. The man expressed his impatience, and Midoriya took a fighting stance, insisting they didn't want to fight and just wanted to pass. The man refused, stating he had a job to do, and began to transform into a large purple beast. Midoriya and Uraraka cautiously stepped back, having never encountered anything like this before. Uraraka instinctively gripped Midoriya's hand, her voice trembling as she asked what they should do. He steadied his breathing, releasing her hand and positioning himself protectively in front of her. He questioned the villain's motives, pointing out that All Might would soon arrive and could easily defeat him. The beast responded that capturing them was part of the plan. Midoriya turned to Uraraka, urging her to return to the main area while he held off the villain. She was shocked and refused to leave, insisting on staying to help. Frustrated, Midoriya explained that this was a trap for All Might and that they were the only ones aware of it. He insisted that she needed to go, emphasizing that his quirk had a better chance against the beast than hers. Despite her reluctance, he coldly stated that she would only hinder him. Hurt, she finally turned and ran, seeking the exit. Midoriya sighed in relief, knowing someone needed to inform Aizawa. The villain chuckled, mocking Midoriya's decision. Midoriya groaned, asking for the villain's name. The man smirked, introducing himself as Daigo before launching himself at Midoriya. Midoriya blocked the attack with his cybernetic arm, but the force sent him crashing to the ground, a cry of pain escaping him. Daigo pressed the attack, forcing his fist against Midoriya, slowly breaking through his defenses and causing cracks to form in the concrete beneath them. Before Daigo could attack again, Midoriya rolled out of the way as Daigo's fist slammed into the ground. He quickly got to his feet, gripping his side in pain. Rubbing the back of his head, he felt something wet and looked at his hand, noticing a stain. Daigo smiled, confident in his victory, suggesting that once he finished with Midoriya, he might turn his attention to someone else. Midoriya's expression shifted to anger as he prepared to counterattack. However, he suddenly felt lightheaded and stumbled back, his vision blurring. He realized he needed a moment to recover. Just then, Daigo slammed the ground, causing a tremor that knocked Midoriya down, gripping his head in discomfort. As Daigo attempted to strike again, Midoriya felt his body become weightless, lifting off the ground. Confused, he rubbed his head until his vision cleared and he saw Uraraka nearby. She urged him to escape. Uraraka released her quirk, allowing Ojiro to leap into the air and strike Daigo with his tail, sending him crashing to the ground. Midoriya stood up, surprised to see his friends. Uraraka approached him to check if he was alright, while Ojiro explained that a smoke villain had separated them. He had joined Uraraka to help Midoriya, noting that he didn't look well. Midoriya managed a lopsided smile, grateful for their support, but insisted he needed to do one more thing to ensure their safety. As Daigo groaned, Midoriya moved away from Uraraka, warning Daigo not to pursue him again. With determination, he grabbed Daigo's arm and swung him around, building momentum. With a powerful release, he sent Daigo flying through the air, crashing through multiple buildings. Finally, Midoriya let out a sigh of relief, but as his vision blurred and his eyelids grew heavy, he succumbed to unconsciousness. Bakugo groans as his head hits the ground. Kirishima quickly grabs Bakugo by the top of his costume, pulling him out of the way just before Swordkill's attack makes contact. Before Kirishima can catch his breath, he activates his quirk. Swordkill leaps off his left foot, activating his sword quirk and moving at incredible speed, slamming his sword into Kirishima's arm. Kirishima groans as the force of the attack increases, and his eyes widen in alarm as he hears a crack. His quirk is breaking. Swordkill seizes the opportunity, stepping back and slamming the side of his sword into Kirishima's head with such force that Kirishima stumbles backward, his quirk fading away, and a trickle of blood appears on his forehead. Swordkill smirks as he releases his quirk, watching Kirishima fall to the ground beside Bakugo. Rolling his shoulder, Swordkill turns his attention to 13, who is climbing back to her feet, ready to fight. He declares that it's time to end this as he activates his quirk once more. Midoriya groans as he wakes up on Ojiro's back. Confused, he asks what's happening. Ojiro smiles and explains that Midoriya passed out after throwing a large opponent. Midoriya lifts his head to look around and recalls the events. He turns to Uraraka, feeling the need to clarify his earlier words. Uraraka reassures him that she understands he didn't mean it, noting that it didn't sound like him. They agree to focus on reaching Aizawa and 13. Midoriya feels ready to walk again, and Ojiro sets him down. As Midoriya rubs his head, he notices a rough material likely used to stop the bleeding. Thoughts race through his mind. They came for two reasons: him and 13. He wonders why the villains want to kill 13, considering her ranking isn't particularly special, but her quirk is powerful, the ability to create a black hole. Whatever the villains are planning, 13 is likely their biggest concern. He turns to the others, urging them to reach 13 quickly. Ojiro scratches his head, noting that the area resembles a maze. Uraraka declares that she feels up to using her quirk. She activates it on Midoriya and Ojiro, allowing Midoriya to grab Ojiro by his GI and leap into the air, searching for the exit. Ojiro points toward a possible escape route. In the main USJ area, 13 spins to face Swordkill. She expresses her reluctance to use her quirk, knowing it could be lethal, but declares that he has left her no choice after harming her students. She stretches out her hand, activating her quirk to create a black hole, but Swordkill is too fast. Before she can fully unleash her power, he vanishes. As she turns around, she feels the sharp slash of Swordkill's sword cutting through the back of her suit. Gritting her teeth, she faces him again. Swordkill stands there, his blade dripping with remnants of her suit, his eyes cold and calculating. He taunts her, claiming she won't catch him with that trick, as he is aware of her ability. 13 narrows her eyes, knowing she cannot afford to make any more mistakes. She vows to protect her students, and Swordkill smirks, suggesting she should worry about herself as he glances at the two unconscious students. Without hesitation, 13 activates her quirk again, this time with more precision. She creates a smaller, more focused black hole aimed directly at Swordkill. He dodges, but 13 anticipates his movement, adjusting the trajectory of her quirk to pull in debris from the battlefield. Rocks smash into Swordkill, causing him to grunt in pain as he grips his shoulder. 13 charges forward, smashing her fist into his face, sending him stumbling back. He rolls with the fall but quickly springs back to his feet. Although he grins, his smile falters as he feels blood drip from his nose, and he chuckles, finding the situation amusing. Swordkill leaps away at breakneck speed, disappearing from 13's sight. Panic rises within her as she realizes he has become faster. He lands a devastating attack, stabbing his sword into her arm, and she cries out in pain. Swinging her good arm, she tries to knock him off, but he is already gone. As blood seeps from her suit, she calms herself, recognizing that while he is faster, his movements remain predictable. She predicts his next move, turning to the right and shooting her black hole. As soon as Swordkill's feet touch the ground, he is pulled toward her. 13 stops her quirk just before he is SE'd in, landing a powerful punch to the side of his head, disorienting him. His knees hit the ground as he grips his head, deactivating his quirk. 13 stands above him, clutching her arm, and remarks that while she may not be a fighter, her quick thinking compensates for it. She tells him to stay down, asserting that she is a rescue hero and does not wish to kill him. Swordkill snarls in response. Before 13 can reply, she hears calls and turns to see Midoriya, Uraraka, and Ojiro approaching. She expresses relief that they are okay and asks for their help with their friends. Midoriya smiles upon seeing 13, but his expression quickly shifts to shock as he notices Swordkill activating his quirk. In a panic, Midoriya activates his cybernetics and leaps forward, shouting for 13. She hears his cries, but it is too late. 13 feels the sword stab through her body, and Swordkill sighs, declaring his mission complete as her body drops to the floor. Just as Midoriya's feet touch the ground, Swordkill has already moved, his speed unmatched as he disappears and reappears a distance away. Midoriya rushes to 13, pleading for her to hold on. Uraraka and Ojiro arrive at the scene, freezing in shock at the sight of 13's body. Ojiro knelt down to Midoriya's level, applying pressure to the wound and urging him to call for Ida, who could help get 13 to safety. Midoriya nodded, preparing to stand, but then he heard 13's hesitant voice, revealing that Ida had gone for help. Midoriya groaned, realizing they needed to act quickly. He estimated that it had been about 30 minutes since they had all separated, and reinforcements should arrive soon. Determined, Midoriya stood to face Swordkill, who merely sighed, declaring that his mission was complete. Midoriya scoffed, refusing to let Swordkill leave after what he had done to 13. Fueled by anger and determination, he charged at Swordkill, his cybernetic enhancements activating to give him a surge of speed and power. Swordkill smirked, his confidence unwavering as he prepared his sword. Swordkill acknowledged Midoriya's bravery but dismissed it as foolishness without skill. Midoriya, however, focused solely on his attack. He leaped into the air, aiming a powerful punch at Swordkill. But Swordkill was quicker, sidestepping the attack effortlessly and countering with a swift slash that knocked Midoriya down. Before the confrontation could escalate further, a loud crash echoed from the roof, followed by a booming voice announcing that help had arrived. As soon as Swordkill hears the voice, he leaps back and taps the communicator in his ear, signaling Kurogiri that it's time to go. Just as he says that, a purple smoke begins to surround him. Midoriya, filled with determination despite his injuries, smashes his fist into the ground and leaps to his feet, charging at Swordkill in an attempt to grab him. He cannot let Swordkill escape after everything that has happened. Swordkill merely smiles as he vanishes into thin air. Midoriya's heart races as he cries out in frustration. Suddenly, purple puffs of smoke appear all over the battlefield, collecting some of the villains they had brought. However, the moment All Might touches the ground, the smoke disappears and does not return. Midoriya watches this, but his vision begins to blur, and before he knows it, he finds himself on the ground. Eventually, Midoriya slowly regains consciousness, waking up on a gurney inside an ambulance. He feels pressure on his arm as the medics attempt to insert a needle. Realizing what they are trying to do, he jolts up and pulls his arm away. The nurse jumps back, turning to another medic, announcing that he is awake. The medic reassures Midoriya that he has lost some blood from a wound on his head and that the foredrip they were trying to insert was to help replenish his blood volume. He asks Midoriya to lie down, but Midoriya, still feeling dizzy, insists that he is fine and pushes himself out of the ambulance. As he observes his surroundings, he notices that the police have arrived and most of his classmates have already cleared out. However, his focus shifts when he catches a glimpse of a group of medics rushing 13's body into another ambulance. Her suit is cut open, and he can see that her injuries are severe. She is bleeding, and that is all he sees before the ambulance speeds away. Suddenly, Kirishima approaches him, and as he reaches Midoriya, he stumbles, only to be caught by Kirishima. Concerned, Kirishima asks if Midoriya is okay and expresses surprise that he thought Midoriya was with the medics. As Kirishima helps him up, he feels a small shock and pulls his hand back, attributing it to static electricity. Midoriya brushes off the comment, standing back up and asking Kirishima if he knows how they are getting back. Kirishima nods and points to the bus, confirming that it is over there. Midoriya acknowledges this and heads toward the bus. Back at UA, All Might, Principal Nizu, Midnight, and a few other staff members are in a room with a detective who is reviewing his notes. He informs them that their investigators are looking into the villains that attacked USJ, but they have found nothing regarding the warp villain or the man with the sword quirk. Vlad King interjects, expressing frustration at the lack of information. The detective shakes his head, explaining that after speaking to some of the students, particularly Masahiro Ojiro, they learned that the villains were specifically after 13, likely due to her powerful quirk and its potential. All Might nods, understanding the implications of their actions. Midnight adds a light-hearted comment, suggesting that the villains might just be afraid of All Might, given his status as the #1 hero. All Might dismisses this notion as Nizu inquires about the villain Mr. Ojiro mentioned. The detective confirms that while 72 villains were arrested at USJ, none fit the description provided by Ojiro. They suspect that he and the sword quirk villain are part of a larger group working under someone. Principal Nizu stands, emphasizing the need to keep the state of 13 confidential to avoid causing unnecessary worry among the students. He has already informed Aizawa about the situation. Days pass, and UA finally allows Class 1A to return. Aizawa enters the classroom, covered in bandages from head to toe. With a muffled voice, he addresses the class, acknowledging their concerns about 13's condition and assuring them that the doctors say she will be fine. The class breathes a collective sigh of relief, except for Midoriya, who doubts Aizawa's words, recalling how badly injured 13 appeared. He wonders if her injuries were not as severe as he thought or if Aizawa is withholding the truth. Aizawa continues, shifting the focus to something more important. Kirishima eagerly asks if it involves more villains, but Aizawa shakes his head, revealing that it is about the UA Sports Festival. Yayarozu questions whether the festival will still take place despite the recent attack. Aizawa confirms that the games are crucial for aspiring heroes, and those who perform well could be scouted. Kaminari lights up at the prospect, recalling that those who get scouted can join agencies after graduation and potentially become sidekicks. Jiro reminds everyone to be cautious, as some people end up as sidekicks rather than becoming their own heroes. She playfully suggests that Kaminari might be heading in that direction, recalling his earlier antics at USJ. Kaminari's enthusiasm quickly fades as he falls back into his seat, feeling defeated. Aizawa continues, emphasizing the importance of the festival and encouraging everyone to do their best if they want to go pro. The class's faces light up with determination. Midoriya maintains a calm expression, but his mind is preoccupied with thoughts of the villains at USJ and their motives. During lunch, Midoriya decides to join Ida and Uraraka. Their conversation shifts to their reasons for wanting to become heroes, with Uraraka expressing her desire to help her parents financially and Ida wanting to follow in his brother's footsteps. Before they can delve deeper into their discussion, Midoriya is unexpectedly pulled away. He looks ahead to see bright blonde hair and realizes it is Melissa. She urges him to be quiet and insists he follow her. Once they reach the support hero workshop, Midoriya finally catches his breath and asks what this is about. Melissa, with a serious expression, points out that he is bleeding from his arm. Midoriya looks down and notices blood dripping from his shirt. He had forgotten about the cut he found a couple of days ago, and with his cybernetic arm, he hadn't been able to go to the hospital. He calmly rolls up his sleeve to reveal a bandage wrapped around his arm. Melissa quickly retrieved a first aid kit from beneath the desk, tying her hair into a ponytail to keep it out of the way. She quietly unwrapped the bandage on his arm, cleaning the cut and preparing to apply a new one. Melissa expressed her concern, worried about his well-being after not hearing from him for a couple of days. Midoriya sighed, appreciating her concern. He reassured her that he was fine, just feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Melissa looked at him, her eyes softening. She acknowledged the tough times they had faced, mentioning the brutal attack and what had happened to 13. Midoriya nodded slowly, his mind drifting back to the chaotic battle. He wished he could have done more, reflecting on 13's bravery and the fact that she was hurt because he couldn't stop the attackers in time. As Melissa finished securing the bandage, she looked him in the eye and reminded him that he had done his best, which was all anyone could ask for. She emphasized that 13 wouldn't want him to blame himself. Although he nodded, guilt still gnawed at him. He felt responsible, thinking that if he had called out to her or distracted her, she might have seen the attack. He wished he could have been stronger. Melissa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, urging him to stop dwelling on the past. She reminded him that he couldn't change what had happened and that 13 was still alive. The true blame lay with those who had committed the attack. She encouraged him to remember that he was still getting used to his cybernetics and that there was a limit to what he could do at the moment. She believed he would grow stronger but emphasized the importance of taking care of himself, as he couldn't protect anyone if he wasn't in one piece. Midoriya absorbed her words, realizing the truth in them. He acknowledged that he needed to focus on what he could do now and work on becoming stronger for the future, not wanting to lose anyone else. Melissa smiled warmly, urging him to promise he would be more careful. He nodded, a small smile forming on his lips, and promised her. Standing up, he suggested they get something to eat, mentioning that someone had dragged him away before he had the chance. She smiled back, playfully telling him to stop whining and asking for her blazer. As he handed it to her, she suddenly felt a shock and dropped the blazer, rubbing her hand in surprise. Midoriya shrugged, explaining it was just static shock, something that had been happening all day. She then dragged him over to the table, placing his cybernetic arm under the scanner, and he sighed, realizing they weren't eating just yet. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The characters had been through a whirlwind of events, each moment shaping their journey in ways they could never have anticipated. As they gathered in the familiar meeting place, a sense of camaraderie filled the air. They exchanged glances, each one reflecting the trials they had faced and the bonds they had forged. The weight of their experiences hung heavy, but it was also a source of strength. The leader, with a determined expression, outlined the next steps they needed to take. The group listened intently, their resolve hardening with each word. They knew that challenges lay ahead, but together, they felt invincible. In the distance, shadows loomed, hinting at the obstacles they would soon encounter. The characters steeled themselves, ready to face whatever came their way. Their hearts raced with a mix of fear and excitement, but they were united in purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape, they set forth on their journey, each step echoing with the promise of adventure and the hope of triumph. Midoriya groaned as he found himself stuck in Melissa's lab for a couple of hours, missing part of the last PRD. He rushed back to class, hoping to explain himself to Mr. Aizawa. As he rounded the corner, he noticed a small crowd surrounding his classroom, with Bakugo shouting something. From the snippets of conversation he overheard, it seemed that those who hadn't made it into the hero course had a chance to prove themselves in the sports festival and potentially take their spots. Midoriya didn't have time to dwell on the enemies Bakugo had made for them. He pushed past the crowd and headed straight for his desk, the murmurs of his classmates fading into the background as something more pressing occupied his mind. The 2 hours in the lab hadn't been in vain. Melissa had discovered something important. In a flashback, a beeping sound emanated from the machine as Midoriya finally withdrew his hand. He asked Melissa if she had found anything, and she leaned back in her chair, confirming that her father had configured the tech to mimic a real arm, even down to small sensations like static shocks. However, it appeared that Midoriya's arm had upgraded the feature to deliver a small electric shock. He stretched out his arm, curious if he could control it. Melissa pressed a few buttons on the keyboard and explained that it was programmed for random actions but had a higher chance of reacting with increased blood pressure or heart rate. Midoriya nodded, and she offered to turn it off, but he declined, believing it could help him win the sports festival. After grabbing his belongings from his desk, he made his way outside and headed for the woods. He set his bag down and pulled out a light bulb, deciding it was a safe place to test his newfound ability. He remembered Melissa's advice to start small. Grasping the bottom of the bulb, he closed his eyes to concentrate. Melissa had mentioned that heightened emotions could activate it, so he began to think about the USJ incident in 13, feeling a pang of guilt. However, the bulb remained dim. He sighed, realizing that while he felt guilty about 13, it wasn't as intense as before. Melissa's words had helped. Lying on his back, he let the wind blow past him, reflecting on the USJ event. The memory of Swordkill's cold, calculating eyes and the speed of his attacks sent a shiver down Midoriya's spine. His breathing quickened, and he tightened his grip on the bulb. Suddenly, it began to flicker. The feelings of being outmatched and the fear of losing his friends surged within him, causing the light bulb to grow brighter with each thought. In a flash, the light bulb illuminated fully before bursting, sending shards flying. Midoriya quickly covered his face to shield himself from the glass. As he jolted up, he noticed blood trickling down his hand from a small cut. He realized that fear had triggered his ability. Packing up the broken glass, he reflected on how he had activated it during the incident with Kirishima, driven by concern for 13. Despite the cut on his hand, he smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He had completed the first step, now he just needed to learn to control it. Days passed as the students of Class 1A trained for the upcoming UA Sports Festival. Each student focused on honing their abilities, pushing their limits to prepare for the challenges ahead. Midoriya dedicated every spare moment to mastering his new quirk. In the training grounds, Midoriya stood with his classmates, practicing their quirks in the expansive area. Sweat dripped down his face as he concentrated on maintaining a steady flow of energy in his palm, recalling Melissa's words and the fear that had initially triggered his power. Snapping out of his trance, he turned to his classmates and mentioned he was meditating to keep his focus, claiming it helped with quirk development. Ida, adjusting his glasses, remarked that it sounded familiar, though Midoriya felt he was lying. Uraraka's eyes widened with admiration, expressing her interest in joining him. She sat down beside him, mimicking his actions, while Ida returned to his training, working on increasing his speed. Midoriya glanced at Uraraka, who was diligently attempting to meditate. At least they believed him, he thought, closing his eyes again to refocus on controlling his quirk without drawing attention. After a few minutes of silence, Uraraka opened one eye and peeked at Midoriya, asking if he truly thought this would help with their quirks. He opened his eyes and nodded, admitting he wasn't sure but believed it helped with focus and control. Uraraka smiled brightly, eager for anything that could assist her in the festival. She shared her desire to succeed for her parents, who had worked hard to support her. Midoriya listened intently, feeling honored by her trust. He assured her that she would make them proud. Uraraka blushed slightly but smiled, asking about his own motivations for wanting to be a hero. Midoriya reflected for a moment before sharing his lifelong dream of saving people with a smile, just like All Might, and proving to himself that he could succeed despite not having a quirk growing up. Uraraka was impressed, acknowledging how far he had come and expressing her belief that he would be an amazing hero. Midoriya smiled at her encouragement, feeling a renewed sense of determination. They both resolved to give their best in the festival, ready to showcase their capabilities with each other's support. A devastating punch is thrown, smashing into a wooden tree and causing splinters to scatter. Midoriya releases a heavy breath, feeling satisfied with his progress. He thinks to himself that he just needs to keep his control, and he should be ready for the festival. Suddenly he hears explosions in the distance. As he walks closer, he sees Bakugo, sweat dripping from his fingers as he intensifies his explosions. Midoriya decides to step away quietly, but he accidentally steps on a stick, causing Bakugo to spin around, his eyes blazing with anger. Bakugo demands to know what Midoriya is doing there. Midoriya turns to face him, explaining that he is training and focusing on control, just like Bakugo. Bakugo scoffs, his face contorted with rage, and accuses Midoriya of having a defective quirk. He expresses his disbelief about how Midoriya acquired his quirk and warns him to stay out of his way at the festival, as he intends to win. Midoriya clenches his fist, asserting that his quirk is not defective and that he believes it is just as strong as Bakugo's. Bakugo narrows his eyes dangerously, sneering at Midoriya's confidence. He challenges Midoriya, claiming that he has been training his whole life for this moment while Midoriya is merely catching up. Midoriya meets Bakugo's fierce gaze, unflinching, and acknowledges Bakugo's strength. He states that he has been training hard too and will not back down, aiming for the top as well. Bakugo's snarl intensifies as he suggests they settle it right then and there, but Midoriya refuses, insisting they should wait for the festival. Bakugo smirks and places his hand on Midoriya's shoulder, only to unleash an explosion that sends Midoriya flying backward into a tree. Midoriya gasps for breath as he stands back up, clutching his shoulder in disbelief. Bakugo advances, demanding Midoriya prove that his quirk is as strong as his own. Midoriya steadies himself, glaring back at Bakugo and wiping blood from his lip. He asserts that he doesn't need to prove anything to Bakugo and that they will settle it at the festival, where it truly matters. Bakugo growls, but Midoriya suddenly leaps forward, landing a punch square on Bakugo's jaw, holding back his full strength. Bakugo stumbles back, his eyes widening in disbelief. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Bakugo smirks, clearly enjoying the confrontation. He expresses his expectation for Midoriya to bring the same energy to the festival. With a final look at Midoriya, he turns and heads back toward Yue, his explosive gait echoing his fiery determination. Midoriya watches Bakugo leave, the weight of their encounter settling in. He knows the festival will be intense, but he feels even more resolved to prove himself. As Midoriya heads back to his training spot, he notices rustling in the bushes. A bob of blonde hair emerges, and he realizes it is Melissa. She steps out, brushing off her clothes, and her eyes immediately land on Midoriya. Concern washes over her face as she notices the cut on his lip. Melissa steps closer, her worry evident as she asks what happened. Midoriya touches his lip, trying to downplay it, claiming it's just a small cut from training. Melissa insists that even a small injury should be cleaned up. Midoriya nods, promising to take care of it before the festival. He then notices the box she is hiding and asks what she brought. Melissa's face brightens as she explains that she brought snacks since Midoriya's mom told her he skipped breakfast to get there early. Midoriya smiles as he looks inside the box, admitting he was getting pretty hungry. As he reaches for an energy bar, Melissa brushes a strand of hair behind her ear, her concern softening into a warm smile. She then reveals that she made something special for him, a pair of custom-made goggles. They are bluish-green with thick lenses and an adjustable strap. Melissa explains that they not only protect his eyes from debris but also provide thermal vision and environmental analysis, which will be useful during the festival. Midoriya's eyes light up with excitement as he admires the goggles. He expresses his gratitude, acknowledging how incredible Melissa is and how much this will help him. Melissa blushes, pleased that he likes them, and shares her desire to support him in any way she can. Midoriya examines the goggles closely, appreciating the high-tech features and thoughtful craftsmanship. He checks the time on his phone and realizes he should head over to change into his sports uniform. Melissa nods, and they walk back together. Class 1A lines up at the entrance of the arena, their uniforms freshly pressed and their faces a mix of determination and nervousness. The energy among the students is electric, with everyone focused on the challenges ahead. Midoriya adjusts the new goggles, the lenses glinting in the sunlight, and takes a deep breath to calm his racing heart. Beside him, Uraraka and Ida exchange last-minute words of encouragement. Uraraka reminds everyone to do their best and stay focused, while Ida emphasizes that they have prepared for this moment. Midoriya gives them both a reassuring smile, expressing his determination to give it everything they've got. As they step forward into the arena, the crowd roars with excitement. Present Mick's voice booms over the loudspeakers, amplifying the thrill in the stadium as he welcomes everyone to the UA Sports Festival. With the students lined up, the opening ceremony begins as Present Mick's voice booms over the loudspeakers, amplifying the excitement in the stadium. He welcomes everyone to the UA Sports Festival, and the crowd erupts in cheers, the sound reverberating throughout the massive arena. Present Mic continues with his signature enthusiasm, announcing the start of an obstacle course that will challenge the competitors in ways they have never imagined. High-flying action, intense challenges, and hero-worthy performances are expected. As Present Mic hypes up the crowd and introduces the competitors, the atmosphere becomes electric with anticipation. The countdown to the start of the race begins, and the competitors prepare themselves for the challenge ahead. Midoriya takes a deep breath, adjusts his goggles, and positions himself at the starting line. The final announcement blares over the speakers, signaling that the race is about to begin. Competitors get ready, and when the signal is given, Midoriya doesn't hesitate. Using his cybernetic leg for a powerful boost, he launches ahead, sprinting past several classmates with remarkable speed. For a brief moment, he leads the pack, feeling the rush of excitement, but that advantage quickly fades. In a blur, Ida speeds past him with his engines roaring, followed closely by Bakugo, who propels himself forward with explosive bursts, and Todoroki, who skillfully freezes the ground. Behind him to slow down the others. Midoriya skids to a halt for a split second as his shoes grip the icy surface, narrowly avoiding a slip. Present Mick's voice echoes through the mic, noting Todoroki's quick thinking in freezing the ground, making it tough for the others to run. Midoriya groans, struggling to maintain his balance on the slippery ice left by Todoroki. His feet slide with each step, and he knows he won't get far like this. He crouches down, steadying himself, and takes a deep breath. Focusing on his cybernetic leg, he channels all his energy into a powerful leap, launching himself off the icy surface with a force that cracks the ground beneath him. As he soars through the air, Present Mick's voice booms across the stadium, amplified for the excited crowd. Midoriya clears a significant distance in one leap, avoiding much of the frozen ground. When he lands further up the track, the momentum from his launch sends him rolling forward, but he quickly finds his footing, pushing himself up with determination. Impressive moves from Midoriya catch the attention of the crowd as he overtakes Yaoyorozu, who used her quirk to vault over the ice. Midoriya steadies himself, his breath visible in the cold air, and looks ahead, eyes widening at the sight of the next obstacle. Towering in front of him, their metal bodies gleaming under the stadium lights, stand several massive zero-pointers, blocking any clear way forward and sending tremors through the ground with each step. He glances to his left and sees Bakugo leaping into the air, explosions crackling from his palms as he uses them to propel himself over one of the massive robots. To his right, Todoroki freezes the legs of one zero-pointer, aiming to immobilize it long enough to slip past. Midoriya watches as Ida speeds ahead, taking advantage of Todoroki's icy path. However, the ice doesn't hold forever as it starts to crack, and Midoriya notices many of his classmates stuck in the ice made by Todoroki. Once the ice breaks, the massive arm of the zero-pointer is poised to fall. Realizing the danger his classmates are in, Midoriya's heart races. He knows he must act quickly. Pulling down his goggles, he activates their scanner mode, which highlights potential weak points in red. A flashing marker zeroes in on the joint at the robot's shoulder, indicating where he could jam the arm's movement if hit hard enough. Midoriya clenches his fist, steeling himself, and launches forward off his cybernetic leg, focusing all his energy on a powerful leap. He shouts a warning as he activates his cybernetics and launches himself into the air. Landing on the robot's massive arm, he slips slightly but quickly finds his balance. Without hesitation, he sprints up the length of the arm, heart pounding as he glances down to see other students rushing past on the ground below. Panic begins to set in. He knows he is losing precious time. Midoriya tells himself to focus, setting aside worries about falling behind. This isn't about winning, not yet. It's about doing what is necessary. Gritting his teeth, he races up the massive arm, zeroing in on the shoulder joint, the weak point his goggles had highlighted. He reaches the joint, wedging himself into the narrow space between the shoulder and arm. With a deep breath, he braces his cybernetic leg against the metal, feeling it hum with energy. Using every ounce of strength he has, he pushes hard, and with a loud crack, the arm tears away from its socket. The massive limb crashes to the ground below, landing safely away from his classmates, who stare up in awe, a mix of relief and admiration on their faces. As the zero-pointer staggers and teeters, destabilized by the lost arm, Midoriya leaps clear, landing in a roll before immediately pushing himself back into a sprint. In the announcer's booth, Present Mike jumps up from his seat, practically buzzing with excitement. He exclaims that even though this is a race, Midoriya took the time to protect his fellow classmates, showcasing the heart of a hero. The crowd roars, electrified by the display. Midoriya can barely hear them over the pounding of his own heartbeat. His breathing is heavy. He can feel the drain in his muscles, the cost of pushing himself so hard so soon. But he gritted his teeth, refusing to slow down as he forced himself onward, his eyes set on the course ahead. The finish line was in sight, the roar of the crowd growing louder with each step. His body was on the edge of exhaustion, every muscle screaming for relief, but he refused to stop now. With the last of his strength, he dug deep and propelled himself forward, crossing the finish line with a desperate leap. He landed hard on the ground, the impact jarring his body as he skidded a few feet across the dirt. His breathing was ragged, his chest heaving as he struggled to stay conscious. Midoriya's vision blurred for a moment, his limbs aching, but a small smile played on his lips. He whispered to himself that he had made it, feeling the weight of his effort and exhaustion. Present Mic's voice rang out as the crowd cheered for the remaining competitors, and Midoriya took a moment to catch his breath, trying to shake off the dizziness. His body felt like it had been put through a blender, but despite the pain, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. He had made it. He had given it his all. Midoriya lay on the ground, struggling to catch his breath when he suddenly heard footsteps approaching. He blinked and looked up, his vision still a little hazy, only to see Bakugo standing in front of him, his expression unreadable. Bakugo sneered, narrowing his eyes as he glared down at Midoriya, questioning whether helping others made him a hero. Still on the ground and struggling to breathe, Midoriya shook his head slowly, expressing that he didn't know if it made him a hero, but he believed it made him a better person than Bakugo, who had left others behind. Bakugo's eyes widened for a split second before his usual scowl returned, and he stepped forward, clenching his fists, demanding to know what that was supposed to mean. Midoriya met his gaze, still breathless but more determined than ever. He expressed that he couldn't be bothered with this right now but reminded Bakugo that the whole event wasn't just about winning and suggested he remember what he was at the school to do as he got up to walk away. Soon he ran into Todoroki, who stopped him to express gratitude for helping others. Todoroki admitted that he hadn't thought his attack through and had put people in danger. Midoriya shook his head, reassuring him that everyone was okay now, and that was what mattered. As the last few people crossed the finish line, the first part of the festival's challenge came to an end. The arena buzzed with excitement as the crowd erupted into cheers. Present Mic's voice echoed across the arena, his excitement palpable as he announced the completion of the first leg of the festival's obstacle course. He praised the incredible show of strength, strategy, and determination, highlighting everything from explosive leaps to heart-stopping moments of teamwork. The points had been tallied, with Ida in the lead, Todoroki close behind in second, and Bakugo in third. With that, they would move on to the next event. With the conclusion of the obstacle course, the competitors moved on to the Cavalry battle, which unfolded much like it did in the show. Midoriya's team scored 615 points, and after completing the last course, they were given a brief break. As the final whistle blew and the Cavalry battle ended, Present Mic's voice resonated through the arena, announcing the intense round that had just taken place. Teamwork, cunning, and raw determination were on full display. Now, the competitors would have a short break to rest, recharge, and prepare for the final showdown, the one-on-one battles. As Midoriya made his way to the break room, a firm hand grabbed his shoulder. Startled, he turned to see Todoroki, his expression calm yet intense. Without a word, Todoroki gestured for him to step aside, away from the bustling hallway. He began to speak, his tone low but pointed, expressing that he had been watching Midoriya. He noted the impressive performance in the obstacle course and how Midoriya handled the zero-pointer with calculated precision. He then inquired if Midoriya's quirk was connected to All Might. Midoriya stood there, shocked at how close Todoroki's analysis was to the truth. Todoroki's probing forced him to reflect on his own background. After finishing his thoughts, Todoroki promised he wouldn't lose in the next battle. Midoriya watched Todoroki leave, letting out a heavy sigh. He felt that the encounter had been overwhelming, realizing that Todoroki didn't know everything for sure. He rubbed the back of his neck, acknowledging that the whole conversation felt like a heavy burden. Still, he felt empathy for Todoroki. Just as he started walking again, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. Turning around, he was suddenly met with Melissa, who leaped at him and wrapped him in a tight hug, exclaiming how amazing he was. Caught off guard, Midoriya stumbled back, trying to regain his balance. Melissa pulled back just enough to look at him, her blue eyes sparkling with pride. She praised him for handling the zero-pointer effortlessly and for persevering through the rest of the course, even with the points disadvantage in the cavalry battle. Midoriya scratched his head, a sheepish smile forming as he downplayed his achievements, crediting Melissa for her help with the goggles that had aided him throughout the festival. Melissa's cheeks flushed slightly as she smiled back at him, expressing her happiness in being able to assist. She found his determination inspiring. However, Midoriya's smile faded as he expressed his doubts about being an inspiration, admitting that he had almost given up and only pushed through because he didn't want her to think less of him. Noticing the conflicted look on his face, Melissa stepped closer, her tone soft yet firm. She reassured him that he would be the kind of hero who puts others before himself, just as he had done that day, even if it meant risking the race. Midoriya's eyes met hers, and his expression softened as he thanked her, realizing he needed to hear those words. Melissa smiled warmly, filled with conviction, wishing him luck in the next match and assuring him that she would be rooting for him. Midoriya nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face as he expressed his gratitude. Before he turned to leave, he acknowledged her ability to say the right things, prompting her to blush slightly, but her smile only grew brighter. She reminded him not to forget that he was capable of more than he thought. He gave her a quick nod as he headed out. Soon, the break ended, and the students rolled out to the arena as Present Mic began his announcement. The excitement in the air was palpable as the crowd roared in anticipation of the final round of the sports festival. Present Mic's voice echoed once more, this time with even more enthusiasm than before, announcing that it was time for the final showdown, the one-on-one battles. The competitors had fought their way through obstacles, team challenges, and tough opponents, and now they would face off head-to-head in epic duels to determine who would reign supreme. The crowd erupted in cheers as the board began to spin, naming the upcoming matches. As the contestants lined up, the massive digital board slowed to a stop, revealing the matchup, Midoriya Izuku vs Todoroki Shoto. A wave of excitement surged through the stadium, and the audience erupted into cheers, knowing this was one of the most anticipated battles of the sports festival. Present Mic's voice resonated throughout the arena, announcing the competitors with enthusiasm. On one side stood Midoriya Izuku, the unstoppable underdog who had fought his way through sheer determination. On the other side was the prodigy, Todoroki Shoto, with the power to freeze and burn anything in his path. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, eager to see how this showdown would unfold. Midoriya stepped forward, fists clenched, determined not to back down. The referee raised a hand, signaling the fighters to take their positions. Midoriya crouched slightly, preparing to react, while Todoroki stood tall and still, his left hand twitching faintly. A hush fell over the stadium as the referee shouted to begin. Todoroki pivoted his foot, and a massive wave of ice erupted from the ground, shooting forward at incredible speed toward Midoriya. He leaped into the air, narrowly avoiding the attack, but the ice surged upward, aiming for him. Midoriya's eyes widened as he realized how fast Todoroki was. He twisted his body mid-air, pulling back his cybernetic arm and smashing his fist into the incoming ice, shattering it. As he landed, a confident grin spread across his face. He declared that if Todoroki wanted to win with just his ice, it wouldn't work, and charged toward him. Todoroki lifted his hand, sending a pillar of ice flying toward Midoriya. Midoriya pulled his arm back, determined to break it. His fist smashed into the pillar, shattering it, but another pillar appeared and struck him in the side, sending him hurtling toward the edge of the arena. Panic surged through Midoriya as he realized he was close to crossing the boundary. He moved his hand into the ground, slowing his momentum just in time. He stood back up, gripping his side, while Present Mike exclaimed about Midoriya's incredible recovery, noting that he just wouldn't quit. The audience roared with approval, and Midoriya huffed, realizing he had underestimated Todoroki. Todoroki smirked, recognizing Midoriya's speed. He decided to change his strategy, releasing a large exhale of cold air. A wave of frigid air burst from his right side, filling the arena with a chilling temperature. Midoriya stiffened, understanding that Todoroki was trying to slow him down. He leaped into the air, escaping the frosty mist. Todoroki attempted to follow his movements, but the mist hindered him. Before he could react, a shard of ice flew toward him, cutting through his arm and causing him to stumble back, interrupting his ice attack. Regaining his bearings, Todoroki saw a silhouette descending toward him. Midoriya smashed his fist into the ground, creating a small quake. With the mist still thick, rocks began hurling toward Todoroki at high speed, forcing him to block with his arms. He realized that Midoriya was somehow able to see through the mist, likely aided by his goggles. This realization made Todoroki feel at a disadvantage. As Midoriya's voice rang out, he challenged Todoroki to stop holding back and use his quirk fully. Todoroki gritted his teeth, torn between his desire to distance himself from his father's legacy and his ambition to become a hero. He decided to embrace his power, allowing the heat from his left side to melt the ice in front of him. The temperature in the arena began to rise, and Present Mike excitedly announced that Todoroki was unleashing everything he had. Midoriya started to sweat from the heat, realizing he might have underestimated the situation. A ball of fire shot toward him, and he barely dodged it before charging at Todoroki. As Todoroki shot another blast of fire, Midoriya smashed his foot into the ground, causing debris to rise and shield him from the flames. He knew he needed a new plan, so he leaped up, throwing more rocks at Todoroki. Instantly, Todoroki switched to ice to block the attack, but as Midoriya landed, ice spread from his foot toward him. Midoriya smashed the ice with his arm, urging Todoroki to attack again. Todoroki shot his fire once more, melting the ice. Midoriya smiled as he dodged the flames, teasing Todoroki about his mistake in creating a puddle on the ground. He explained that his quirk was called Enhance, which not only increased his strength and speed but also enhanced natural characteristics. As he stepped closer and placed his hand on the wet ground, he added that it could generate static electricity. Todoroki's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. A crackle of electricity shot through the water, sending a jolt through his body. Staggering back, he gritted his teeth against the shock. Seizing the opportunity, Midoriya leaped off his cybernetic leg, holding back his strength as he punched Todoroki, sending him flying out of the ring. Present Mic's voice boomed across the arena, declaring Midoriya the winner and celebrating his incredible display of skill as he moved on to the next round. The crowd roars in the aftermath of the fight as Midoriya stands at the edge of the ring, breathing heavily. He reaches out a hand to Todoroki, acknowledging the intensity of their match. Midoriya expresses that it was a good fight and suggests that if Todoroki had gone all out from the start, he might have won. Anger briefly flashes on Todoroki's face, but it quickly fades as he thanks Midoriya, revealing that he realized something important today. Midoriya, slightly confused, accepts the compliment and they both exit the stadium as the next matchup is announced. After a quick visit to Recovery Girl, who scolds them for overexerting themselves before healing their injuries, they make their way back to the waiting room. Kirishima approaches Midoriya with a grin, slapping him on the back and exclaiming how insane the fight was, impressed by Midoriya's resilience. Uraraka beams at Midoriya, praising his performance and noting that Todoroki finally used his fire. Todoroki simply acknowledges this, stating it was time to do so. Bakugo, leaning against the wall, scoffs and warns Midoriya not to get too confident just because of one win. He reminds him that when they fight he won't hold back. Midoriya smirks, confident in his response. As he leaves the break room, he rubs his eye, pondering the ongoing issue with it, but his thoughts are interrupted when he spots Uraraka in the corridor, looking deep in thought with her hands clenched into small fists. Concerned, Midoriya calls out to her. She jumps slightly before turning toward him, her usual bright smile appearing, though it doesn't reach her eyes. She congratulates him on his match, calling him amazing. Midoriya chuckles sheepishly, attributing his success to luck and acknowledging Todoroki as a tough opponent. He then asks if she is okay and if her thoughts are about her upcoming match. Uraraka nods, but her expression suggests something is troubling her. She shifts on her feet and lets out a small breath, revealing that she has been thinking about her fight against Bakugo. Midoriya encourages her to think of strategies, offering her a reassuring smile. Uraraka hesitates before forcing another smile, admitting her concerns about Bakugo's strength and asking if he thinks she can win. Midoriya, taken aback by her question, steps closer and looks her in the eyes. He acknowledges Bakugo's toughness but emphasizes that the festival is not just about winning, it's about showcasing her abilities to the pros. He encourages her to use her intelligence and level-headedness, which she possesses in abundance. Uraraka processes his words, feeling a boost of confidence from his sincerity. She thanks him softly, warmth spreading in her cheeks, and Midoriya assures her that he will be rooting for her in the stands. As Uraraka heads toward the arena, Midoriya watches from the stands as she and Bakugo prepare for their match. The countdown begins, and when the buzzer sounds, Present Mic announces the start of the fight. Bakugo surges forward, launching an explosion from his hands that propels him toward Uraraka. She narrowly dodges, flipping to the side as Bakugo shouts at her not to run. As Bakugo charges again, he fires an explosion aimed at Uraraka, sending her flying across the arena. She lands hard, feeling the impact but gritting her teeth as she pushes herself up onto her knees. Bakugo approaches with a grin, offering her a chance to give up, but Uraraka refuses, determined to stand her ground. Bakugo's grin twitches as he sprints forward, firing off explosions to propel himself at her. Midoriya grips his chair, urging her on silently. Uraraka realizes Bakugo is faster now, but she plants her feet firmly as he approaches. Just as Bakugo moves his hand at her, a loud boom echoes through the arena, and smoke envelopes the area, causing the crowd to fall silent. As the smoke clears, gasps ripple through the audience when they see Bakugo floating in midair, his body weightless. Present Mic excitedly announces this unexpected turn of events, noting that despite Bakugo's powerful attack, Uraraka managed to activate her quirk. Bakugo, confused and frustrated, tries to stabilize himself using explosions but finds it challenging to regain control. Uraraka seizes the moment, thinking quickly to keep Bakugo off balance. As he blasts in multiple directions to clear the space, she cancels her quirk, gravity snapping back. Using the sudden weight, she launches herself downward with incredible speed, her fist clenched. She strikes Bakugo, knocking him down with a series of punches aimed at his chest and shoulders, trying to pin him down and make him yield. Her hits may not be perfect, but they are enough to hold his hands down, preventing him from using his quirk. With desperation in her voice, she urges him to stay down, determined to prove herself in this fight. Her body trembled, her stamina running low, but she refused to stop. Not until he gave up. Not until she proved herself. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched intently. The pro heroes leaned forward, and Aizawa narrowed his eyes, impressed by her determination. Midoriya's heart raced as he observed her pushing past her limits. Finally, Bakugo gritted his teeth, a grin spreading across his face as he unleashed a powerful explosion, sending Uraraka flying backward to the ground. Both fighters lay there, battered and breathing heavily. Midnight hesitated, microphone in hand, assessing the situation. She announced that Bakugo's explosion had sent Uraraka off but had also injured him. They both seemed unresponsive, prompting her to consider the next steps. Bakugo slowly rose to his feet, staggering slightly, one eye swollen and his lips split. he muttered in disbelief as he made his way toward her. Uraraka lay still, attempting to raise her hand, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Before Bakugo could reach her, Midnight raised her hand to declare the outcome. She announced that Achiko Uraraka was unable to continue, and the winner was Katsuki Bakugo. The crowd erupted in cheers as Recovery Girl rushed to the arena. Melissa turned to Midoriya, ready to speak, but before she could, Midoriya leaped over the railings, rushing past Recovery Girl to kneel beside Uraraka. Her eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile formed on her bruised face as she mumbled that he had seen her fight. Midoriya nodded quickly, telling her that she had been incredible and that she had almost had him. She laughed softly, but the sound turned into a wince of pain. Recovery Girl gently nudged Midoriya aside, urging him to move unless he wanted to be next on her stretcher. He nodded and backed off as Recovery Girl took Uraraka out of the stadium, with Bakugo following behind, assisted by other medics. Uraraka's eyes fluttered open, the bright lights of the med bay greeting her. A groan escaped her lips as she sat up, a sharp pain shooting through her side. She noticed Midoriya sitting in a chair beside her, and she jumped slightly at the sight of him. Midoriya looked concerned and spoke gently, reminding her to be careful. He explained that he had come to check on her because she had looked pretty beaten up after the fight. As memories of the battle flooded back, a frown crossed her face. Midoriya placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, encouraging her not to doubt her performance. A small smile began to form on her lips as she acknowledged his words, leaning back against the pillows with a soft sigh. She expressed her gratitude for his presence, and he replied with a warm smile, assuring her it was no trouble at all. He then shared that the tournament had progressed while she was unconscious. Bakugo had advanced to the finals, and he had the chance to move on if he won his next match. Curiosity sparked within her as she asked who his opponent was. Midoriya confidently stated that he only needed to defeat Kirishima. With her uninjured hand, she gave him a thumbs up, encouraging him with her belief in his abilities. If he could handle Todoroki's powerful attacks, she was sure he could manage against Kirishima. Midoriya thanked her for the support, and just then, the announcer called for him. He promised to return and check on her after his match. She smiled and wished him luck as he exited the room, her heart filled with hope for both of their futures in the tournament. Unknown location. Wolfram sits up and taps his communicator, inquiring about Nobu's mission with Daigo. The reply comes swiftly, confirming that the pro-hero Death Arms has been temporarily dealt with. Nara City. Nobu watches Death Arms during his usual patrol. The pro-hero stands tall, directing traffic near a collapsed construction site. In an instant, Nobu races down the building at blinding speed. The crowd below has no time to react as Death Arms senses a shift in pressure behind him but turns too late. Nobu's hands morph into webbed claws, and with a single touch on Death Arms' shoulder, he disappears without a sound or flash. The crowd screams in fear and scatters as Nobu taps his communicator, instructing Daigo to take action and not to mess up like last time. Death Arms crashes from the sky, hurtling through the air before slamming into the earth in a distant forest. Groaning, he rolls onto his side in a small crater, muttering about the green-haired man and his quirk, realizing it is not teleportation but displacement. As he struggles to stand, Daigo charges in with his beast form, delivering a powerful punch that sends Death Arms back into the ground. The punches rain down relentlessly, each hit stronger than the last. Death Arms grits his teeth, feeling overwhelmed as blood trickles from the corner of his mouth. He is pinned down, and Daigo shows no signs of stopping. UA Sports Festival. Midoriya exits the med bay and heads back to the battlefield, contemplating the challenge Kirishima poses. He wonders about the limits of his cybernetics, knowing Kirishima's quirk is formidable as well. The announcer, Present Mic, booms across the stadium, introducing the semifinal round. Izuku Midoriya vs. Eijiro Kirishima. Kirishima grins, urging Midoriya not to hold back, to which Midoriya responds with determination. Midnight raises her hand, signaling the start of the match. Midoriya attacks first, leaping off his cybernetic leg and charging at Kirishima. Kirishima's instincts kick in as he activates his quirk, swinging his arm back and landing a solid blow that sends Midoriya back several feet. Kirishima smirks, acknowledging the impact even with his quirk active. Midoriya smiles, feeling encouraged to continue his assault. He feints right and twists left, aiming a spinning back kick at Kirishima, but Kirishima dodges and counters with a hardened fist that connects with Midoriya's side, sending him rolling to the ground. Midoriya quickly regains his footing, analyzing his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. He knows he must avoid getting hit, realizing that Kirishima's quirk is dependent on stamina. The more damage Kirishima takes, the quicker his quirk will fade. Kirishima lunges with a powerful right hook, but Midoriya dodges and attempts a side kick. Kirishima catches his leg, exclaiming triumphantly. Before Midoriya can react, Kirishima spins and slams him into the ground. Midoriya cries out in pain as Kirishima charges, fists raised high, but Midoriya rolls to the side just in time. Breathing heavily, Midoriya pushes himself to his feet. Kirishima, impressed, acknowledges Midoriya's toughness and declares it's time to finish the fight. Taking advantage of Midoriya's fatigue, Kirishima throws a hardened punch. Midoriya ducks and counters with a powerful uppercut, causing cracks to form in Kirishima's skin. Kirishima stumbles back, and Midoriya seizes the moment, sprinting forward and leaping into a drop kick that connects squarely with Kirishima's chest, launching him into the ground. Both fighters lie on the ground, breathing heavily as the dust settles. Kirishima groans, admitting that Midoriya's kicks feel like steel. Midoriya, wincing in pain, responds that Kirishima's skin feels like he just punched spikes, suspecting his hands might be bleeding. With determination, he pushes himself up, barely able to stand. Kirishima struggles to rise, his quirk beginning to fade as he smashes his fist into the ground, hardening his arms in a last-ditch effort. Midoriya notices his cybernetic hand twitching and grips his wrist, trying to steady himself as he sees Kirishima approaching. His vision blurs, and he feels blood from a wound on his head, realizing he might lose. Suddenly, his eye twitches as he sees a display floating in front of him, reading, "Maximum damage sustained." Entering overdrive mode. This is the last thing he perceives before everything goes dark.